Hello, happy coders. Welcome to the 10th tutorial in my JavaScript 101 series. This will be the last video, at least for now, so thanks for coming along for the journey, and I hope you feel you've got a really good foundation in JavaScript. For our last one, I've got something pretty big, almost a paradigm shift, so hopefully this will send you off with a bang. In this last lesson, I'm going to explain the concept of objects. Object-oriented programming is a relatively new way of coding computers, and it's a really helpful way for us to be able to design our programs. Essentially what it is, an object is, in JavaScript's terms, a type of variable that can store a whole bunch of other information. So let's say you're making a computer game with a character. You know, the player was, for copyright reasons, a character called Blario, right? So Blario, it has a whole bunch of information, a bunch of properties, such as Blario has a name, which is Blario. Blario might have a jump height, how fast, a speed. Speed, how fast Blario can jump. Blario not only has properties, these different pieces of information, each one of which is a variable on its own. Blario can also do certain things, like Blario can run. So that would be a function, a method that Blario has. Blario can also jump and do lots of other things. So the whole idea of object-oriented programming is if we've got all these variables and all these functions that all relate to Blario, we should put them all into one object. And what that means, well, that means two things. One thing that means is that it's all organized. We've got this one sort of package, this one object that contains all that information. It also means we can set up sort of templates or prototypes. We can set up not just Blario, but lots of other characters in the game, because all of them will have a name, all of them will have a speed, all of them can run, all of them can jump. And so we can set up that template once and then sort of duplicate it and modify it to work with all our different characters, players, and other elements in the game. So let's put that into practice, because I think it's always easier to get your head around a big concept when you actually use it. So I'm going to create a new object. Once again, realizing how narcissistic I am making this, I'm going to use myself as an example. So we will make a new object called Gatt, because that's me. So we do that in a similar way. We declare a variable and we give that variable a name, so that'll be Gatt, and then we need to assign it a value. Now here's where it gets new. The value we assign it, you know, in the past we might have said, you know, Gatt or something like that as a variable value, but this time, because it's an object, we're going to use curly braces. You can see we use the curly braces also for functions. We use them for objects as well. And inside the curly braces, we put all of the information that we want. And we declare these variables, these properties, and the functions slightly differently to what you're used to. So do take note of the syntax here. So this time around, I don't need to say var, I just say, or var, I just say the name of my first variable or property. So my first name. So first name, then I put in a colon, not a semicolon, a regular colon. And in quotation marks, because it's a string, I put Chris, my first name. It's that simple. I've now given the first property to this object, Gatt. But like I said before, the beauty of it is we can have lots and lots of variables, lots of properties inside this one object. So I divide it with a comma, and then I could just keep writing on the same line, but for the sake of easy reading, I'm going to put it on a new line. And I'm going to say last name, colon, and in quotation marks because it's a string, Gatt. And I end that line again with a comma. Notice I'm not ending with a semicolon because I'm not actually ending the line of code. Technically, all of this is one line of code. It's just for the sake of my ability to read it easily, I'm putting in line breaks. We don't just have strings like always. We can put in a numeric value. So I'm going to say my age is 36. In the future, maybe it won't be, but at this point it is. Now, for now, that'll do. So I've got three different variables. Notice I end each, I don't put a comma at the end of the last one because it ends with this curly brace. Now, if I want to use that information, I simply refer to it by saying Gatt, which we've got up here, my variable Gatt, full stop, and then whatever property I want to draw on. So age, first name, whatever it is. Now, of course, I need to actually display that somewhere. Normally, I'd just do an alert, but since in the last tutorial I explained how to use the document object model, DOM, I'm going to do that now. So I'll quickly go through a bit of coding based on what we did in the last tutorial to get it to display on the screen. So let's do that together now. So I'm going to create a new variable called text. This is where I'll put all my text. This equals document dot create element. Last time I did divs. This time I'm just going to make it a paragraph. So I'm creating a new paragraph called text. Then I also need to get the content panel so that I can add my text into the content panel here. So var content panel equals document.get element by ID content panel, which is the name of this big white div here. That's all I need for now. So what we're going to do is we're going to add this information to text. So like we did last time, I'm going to say text.inner HTML equals, and then I can put in, well, let's just do it quickly. Let's get it up and running. Gatt.firstName. Okay, that should work. The last thing I need to do is content panel dot append child and text. Okay, so again, most of that was from, well, all of that was from the last tutorial, but just to quickly go through it. So I've got this new paragraph, which I'm calling text. I've got a reference to my content panel here. Inside the text, I'm putting my first name, and then I'm putting text into the content panel, so it should display in it. I will save that. I will refresh up here, and I will run. There we go. So this is the key line of code. I wanted to get my name, Chris. So I went to the object Gatt, and I used full stop first name, and that got this property, the value of this property, which is my name, Chris, and put it there. So now I can go ahead and fill this out. So I don't need to do all of this stuff again. We're just focusing right here. So text.inner HTML. What I can do here is I can actually use this assignment rather than the equal sign plus equals, which means add to what's already there. So now I'm not overriding in the inner HTML, I'm adding to it. So I'm going to add in quotation marks. Actually, what I'll do up here is I'll put it name colon plus. So now it's going to say name, have a space, and then have my first name. Here I'm going to put in a break because I can use my HTML tag. So I'll put in a break to go to a new line, and I'll say, what is it, surname plus Gatt dot last name. And I can go ahead and do the last one, inner HTML plus equals. So I don't want to overwrite. I'm adding in quotation marks a break, and it's my age plus Gatt dot age. Okay, save that, refresh up here. And now, because I'm setting the inner HTML of text to be all of these three things, it should all display here when I run the script. And sure enough, it did. Okay, so you can see that you can have these objects and you can call on their different properties, their different variables, and then in this particular case, we can get that to display on screen. I mentioned earlier in my Bellario example that we don't just have properties though. Objects can also do things. Okay, people can do things. The character can do things. Just to demonstrate that, I'm going to add a method or a function to this object so that you'll see how we can do that. So it's almost the same way. So I'm going to add a comma here, and I'm going to add a new function, something that this Gatt object can do. Just to keep things simple, what I'll get it to do is be able to display my first name and my last name as one line, my full name. So I'm going to have a new property, full name, and the same thing, I'll have my colon here. But this time, instead of entering a specific value, I'm going to say that this is a function. Function with the two parentheses, the two brackets. And then I'm going to have another set of curly braces. Okay, we've declared functions before, like up here. This whole my function is a function. It's exactly the same thing. I've got a function called full name. I'm declaring the function. I've got the parentheses and then curly braces. So inside this, I'm going to get it to send back some information. So I want it to return some text. So return says, after you run this function, here's what I'm giving to you. Here's what I'm going to return to you. And we're going to use the keyword this. This means inside this object, this is referring to itself. So I want this dot first name. So it's trying to say, oh, where do I get first name from? Oh, it's this. It's from within this very thing. In this case, it's Gatt. So this means myself, basically. First name plus a space plus this dot last name, okay, its own last name value, save. So if you followed that, when I run this function called full name, it will return, it will give back my first name plus a space plus my last name. So I'll add that here, text dot inner HTML plus equals, new line, full name, and then I'll add, same thing, Gatt, so I want to refer to the object, full stop, and this time I want to use this function, which is called full name. So full name, and because it is a function, I use my brackets at the end there to say that I want to run a function here. So if I save that and refresh over here and run the script, you can see it's actually run that function. And so here it's returned the value of first name, space, last name. First name, space, last name. Lots more you could do with that, obviously. Again, this is just a demonstration. But hopefully you're seeing, you're building that skill to be able to create an object with properties or variables and functions, things it can do, and that you can see how you can run those things or refer to those things so that you'd be able to use them in a whole range of applications. Now, objects are great, and one of the great things about them isn't just that they collect it all, but like I said before, you can create like a template that you can then use over and over. So let's do that now. Let's create a template so that I don't just have one person called Gatt, but I might want to have lots of different people. I want to make a database of all the people in my school or something. So to do that, we create a new function. So I'm going to go down the bottom here, outside of the curly braces. So I'm outside of my function, and I'm going to create a new function called person. Why is that giving me an underline? No, it's just because I haven't done anything yet. So when we declare a new object type or an object template, I'm going to call it, convention is to use a capital letter for the first word. Normally I don't do that. You'll notice like first name has lowercase f because that's just one variable, but this is a whole, I think it's called a constructor object. And so we'll use capital P. And then in brackets, let me just finish that. So because it's a function, it has the brackets there and the curly braces. Inside these brackets, we can put the arguments or the different values that we want to draw on. So in our case, it was first name, last name, and age. They're the only three we need. And so when someone runs this function, they can create a new object with a first name, last name, and an age. Inside this function, we need to actually set that up to work. So we're going to say this, again, using that keyword this, so it's self dot first name equals first name. So what's going to happen is someone's going to say, I want to create a new person. I'm going to give it this first name. This script will run, this function will run, and it will say, okay, for this new object's first name, this object's first name is whatever you just said their first name is. We're going to repeat that. So this dot last name equals last name, and this dot age equals age. We also need this function here so that we can do full name. So I'm just going to, what am I going to do? I'm going to grab all of that and I'm going to comment it out. So now that's all commented out, and I'm going to copy this so that I don't have to bother copying it again. Now what's wrong there? So need to change the syntax a little bit. So this dot full name equals function. We can see this time around we're using the more familiar equals sign to assign values, whereas up here we're using the colon. So it gets a bit tricky. You've got to remember the different ways of doing things in different contexts, but that's why I have documentation. That's why you've got videos like this that you can refer back to refresh your memory. But that's what I've done. So I've got inside this object, I've got a function, and that function is just the one I had before. And it refers to this first name, this last name. Notice that I didn't have to bring in this function, like I had to bring in first name, last name, and age. I didn't have to bring that in. I can just put it into this object template that it has this function, that it can do this thing, it has this skill, and I didn't have to bring that in again. So now up here, I've got rid of this whole thing of Gatt, but I still am narcissistic. I still want me in it. So now I'm going to create a new variable called Gatt, and here's the clever thing. I don't have to type in all of this jazz like I did last time, because that was quite time consuming. I've done that down here once, and anytime I want to make a new person, I just say I've got a new variable, it's called whatever, and it equals new keyword for you, it's a new capital P person. So I'm saying this variable Gatt is a new one of these objects. And I feed in the different values I need. So first name, Chris, last name, Gatt, and age is 36. End it with a semicolon. And if I've done this correctly, even though I've got rid of all that, the code should work just the same. Let's refresh and run the script. And it has. It's created this object Gatt using this constructor, using this template, and all the rest of the codes work just the same. Up here I can change it to Max Dudson, age 94. Save and refresh and run, and you can see it's all still working. So I could create multiple people now. I could create var Smith equals new person, Joe Smith 22, and now I've got a brand new object called Smith. They're another person with different values here. I'd then have to get it to display on the screen, but I'm not going to do that right now because that would require me to write all this again. Or maybe I could be really clever and create an array of objects and use a for loop to display lots of information. But that's a bit of problem solving for you to figure out. Thanks for watching. I hope you can see the value of objects. Certainly if you keep coding, you will definitely see the value of objects. They are great. Happy coding, and thanks for sticking around till the end of tutorial number 10, the last one.